Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be tackling something a little different and honestly something I'm pretty excited about personally, rally obedience for Cane Corsos.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I think it's a really good fit for Cane Corsos and their owners.
Yeah, I think so too. And, our Cane Corsos, they're smart dogs. They need a lot of mental stimulation. And I think this really fits the bill. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Maybe we should take a step back and for those who might not be familiar with it, what exactly is rally obedience?
Okay, so rally obedience, also called rallyo, is a dog sport, and it's all about teamwork and communication between you and your dog.
Okay, so we're already hitting on that bond that's so important with Cane Corsos.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're mainly pulling from the Cane Corso podcast. They had an awesome episode on rallyo.
And they really broke it down, so I'm excited to kind of share some of those insights with our listeners.
Yeah.
So rallyo is about teamwork.
Yeah, so picture this. You and your Cane Corso are navigating a course together, and there are these stations set up, maybe 10 to 20 of them.
Like an obstacle course.
Kind of, but instead of jumping hurdles, your dog is showing off their obedience skills at each station.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. So there's a course with stations. What happens at each station?
Each station has a sign, and the sign tells you what skill to perform with your dog.
So, like, sit, stay down.
Exactly. And, heel position, come all the basic obedience commands you've probably already taught your Cane Corso.
I got to say, heel position, that was always been a bit of a challenge for me and my Corso. She's got a mind of her own.
I hear you. It takes practice and patience, especially with a breed as independent as the Cane Corso. But that's part of the fun of rallyo. It's a journey you and your dog take together.
And it sounds like it's a lot more engaging than traditional obedience, where you just kind of stand there silently while your dog performs.
Yeah. Right. It's much more dynamic. In rallyo, you're allowed to encourage your dog throughout the course. You can talk to them, use hand signals, really make it a team effort.
And that sounds a lot more like my style of training. I like to be a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more interactive with my Corso.
And that's what's so great about rallyo. It caters to different training styles and personalities. And I think for Cane Corsos in particular, it offered some really compelling benefits.
Yeah, the Cane Corso podcast highlighted a whole bunch of them, and I have to say they really resonated with me. So let's dive into those benefits. What makes rallyo so great for Cane Corsos?
Well, first and foremost, mental stimulation. Cane Corsos are incredibly intelligent dogs, and they need mental challenges to keep them happy and engaged.
Absolutely. I mean, if my Corso doesn't get enough mental stimulation, she gets into all sorts of mischief.
Right. They need an outlet for all that brain power, and rallyo is like a puzzle for them. It forces them to think and problem solve.
So it's not just physical exercise, it's a mental workout too.
Exactly. And that mental workout can be just as tiring as a physical one. And speaking of physical exercise, rallyo provides that too, but in a controlled way.
Which is important with the Cane Corso. Their strength and energy can be a bit overwhelming at times.
You're not kidding. It's like having a furry bulldozer in your house sometimes. But with rallyo, you're channeling that energy into structured movements and commands.
So you're basically teaching them to harness that power and use it in a positive way.
Precisely. And as they master these skills, their confidence grows too. It's amazing to see a Cane Corso who might be a bit unsure of themselves blossom on the rallyo course.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
It's like they're saying, hey, look what I can do.
And you're there to cheer them on every step of the way. It's a truly rewarding experience for both you and your dog.
That bond-building aspect is what really appeals to me. I
Yeah.
love the idea of having this activity that I can share with my Corso, something that brings us closer together.
And that's one of the most beautiful things about rallyo. It strengthens that connection between you and your dog through teamwork communication and shared success.
So we've talked about mental stimulation, controlled exercise confidence building, and of course that all-important bond between handler and dog. Anything else?
Well, we can't forget about the socialization aspect. Rallyo provides a controlled environment for your Cane Corso to interact with other dogs and people.
Which is so important, especially for a breed that can sometimes be a bit wary of strangers.
You're right. Cane Corsos can have a reputation for being aloof or even intimidating. But with proper socialization, they can learn to be comfortable and confident in a variety of situations.
I think a lot of people are surprised by how well Cane Corsos can do in social settings when they're properly trained and socialized.
Absolutely. They're capable of forming strong bonds not just with their owners, but with other dogs and people too.
So rallyo is like a win-win-win. You get mental and physical exercise, you strengthen your bond, and you even get some socialization in the mix.
Exactly. It's a pretty amazing sport, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I'm already starting to get hooked just talking about it. But I'm also realizing that there are probably some unique challenges that come with training a Cane Corso for Rallyo. I mean, they're not exactly known for being the most agile or biddable breed.
You bring up a good point. There are definitely some challenges specific to cane corsos, but the good news is that with the right approach and a bit of patience, you can overcome them and set your cane corso up for success in Rallyo.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Let's dive into those challenges. What are we up against here?
Well, first off, their size. Cane corsos are big, powerful dogs, and those tight turns and precise movements that are common in Rallyo can be a bit tricky for them.
I could just imagine my Corso trying to do a 180-degree turn in a tight space. Be like watching a cruise ship trying to dock.
Haha, that's a great visual. But it's something to be mindful of. You might need to adapt some of the exercises or work on their body awareness to help them navigate those tight spaces.
Body awareness, what's that?
It's basically helping your dog become more aware of their own body and how it moves in space. So things like teaching them to target specific body parts or practicing backing up can improve their overall coordination and control.
That makes sense. So it's not just about teaching them the obedience commands. It's about helping them understand their own physicality.
Precisely. And then there's the strength factor. Cane corsos are strong-willed and physically powerful, which can be a challenge during training.
Especially if they decide to pull on the leash.
Exactly. You definitely want to have good leash manners established before diving into Rallyo. We want to avoid any accidental mishaps.
Safety first, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of strong-willed, cane corsos are also known for their independent streak, which can translate to distractions on the Rallyo course.
Yeah, my Corso has a bit of a selective hearing problem. She's great at following commands when she wants to, but if she sees a squirrel, forget it.
It's like they have a built-in radar for distractions, but that's where focus and attention training comes in.
So it's not just about teaching them the skills. It's about teaching them to tune out those distractions and stay engaged with you.
You got it. And that takes time, patience, and consistency.
And probably a lot of high-value treats.
Uh-huh. Those definitely help. But remember, every cane corso is different, so find what motivates your dog and use it to your advantage.
So we've got size, strength, independence. What else?
Well, we also need to consider their endurance. While cane corsos are athletic dogs, they're not necessarily built for endurance sports.
Right, they're more like sprinters than marathon runners?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you'll need to build up their stamina gradually, starting with short training sessions and increasing the duration as their fitness improves.
No pushing them too hard too soon. We don't want any injuries.
Right. And lastly, we can't forget about the intimidation factor.
Oh yeah, Cane Corsos definitely have a presence about them.
With their size, their muscular build, and sometimes those serious expressions, they can be a bit intimidating to other dogs and even people, especially those who aren't familiar with the breed.
It's not their fault, they just look tough.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But it's something to be aware of, and it highlights the importance of socialization.
Absolutely. We want our Cane Corsos to be comfortable and confident in a variety of environments around different people and dogs.
Exactly. So socialization is key for ensuring that your cane corso is a well-adjusted and well-mannered member of society.
Okay, so we've talked about the benefits of Rallyo for Cane Corsos, and we've explored some of the challenges specific to this breed. It sounds like it's definitely doable, but it requires careful planning and a tailored approach.
Absolutely. But don't let the challenges discourage you. The rewards of training a cane corso for Rallyo are immense.
I'm already starting to feel inspired, and I know our listeners are eager to hear more about how to actually get started with this whole Rallyo adventure. So let's dive into the practical stuff.
Sounds good. Let's get down to business.
What are the first steps?
Well, the Cane Corso podcast had some great advice on this, and it all starts with finding the right resources.
Okay, I'm all ears. What do they recommend?
First and foremost, they suggest starting with a Rallyo class or workshop.
That makes sense. Having an experienced instructor to guide you through the basics can be incredibly helpful, especially when you're dealing with a breed like the Cane Corso that can be a bit headstrong at times.
You're telling me? They can definitely test your patience. But a good instructor can help you navigate those challenges and set you and your dog up for success.
And besides the technical aspects of Rallyo, I imagine a class or workshop is also a great way to socialize your Cane Corso and get them used to working around other dogs and people.
Absolutely. It's like a two-for-one deal. You're learning the skills and you're providing your Cane Corso with valuable socialization opportunities.
Now, I know not everyone is comfortable with group classes, or maybe they just prefer to go at their own pace. What about those folks who are more DIY inclined? Can you start practicing Rallyo at home before committing to a class?
Absolutely. You don't need a fancy training facility or expensive equipment to get started with Rallyo. You can use everyday objects to create your own mini courses at home.
Okay, now you've got my attention. What kind of everyday objects are we talking about?
Think cones, buckets, laundry baskets, even pillows. You can use cones to mark out a path for your cane corso to follow. Have them weave between buckets or practice a sit-stay in front of a laundry basket.
I love that. It's like turning your living room into a doggy obstacle course.
Exactly. And the best part is it's a fun and engaging way to bond with your cane corso. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent and make it enjoyable for both of you.
Now, the Cane Corso podcast also mentioned different levels of competition in Rallyo. Can you give us a quick overview of what those levels are and how they work?
Of course, Rallyo competitions typically start with a novice level, then move up to advanced excellent, and sometimes even master levels.
So it's like a tiered system where you progress as your skills improve.
Exactly. Each level introduces more complex skills and challenges requiring greater precision and control from both you and your dog.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you start with the basics and gradually work your way up to the more advanced stuff.
Precisely. And the great thing about Rallyo is that you don't have to compete if you don't want to. You can simply enjoy the training and bonding experience with your dog.
It's all about finding what works best for you and your Cane Corso.
Exactly. And if you do decide to dip your toes into the competitive side of things, I highly recommend attending a few competitions as a spectator before jumping in.
That's a good idea. It's like scouting out the territory, getting a feel for the atmosphere and seeing how other handlers and dogs perform.
Precisely. And it can give you a better understanding of the different levels and what's expected at each one.
Okay, so we've talked about finding a class, practicing at home, attending competitions as a spectator, all great starting points. But what about actually competing? How do you make that leap from practicing to performing?
Well, the Cane Corso podcast had a great suggestion for this. Start with fun matches.
Fun matches, what are those?
They're basically like practice competitions. They're more relaxed, low-pressure environments where you can try out your skills and get feedback from judges without the stress of official rankings or qualifications.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah.
It's like a dress rehearsal for the big show.
Exactly. It gives you and your cane corso a chance to get used to the competition environment, work through any nerves, and build confidence before entering official events.
I love that idea. It's like a stepping stone to the real deal.
Precisely. And who knows, you might even win a ribbon or two.
Now, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
But even if we don't win, it sounds like a fun and valuable experience.
Absolutely. The most important thing is to have fun and enjoy the journey with your cane corso. Don't get too caught up in the competitive aspect. Cherish the bond you're building and the skills you're developing together.
Well said. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into rally obedience for Cane Corsos. We've explored what Rallyo is, why it's a great fit for this breed, and we've even touched on some of the challenges and how to get started.
I think we've laid a solid foundation for our listeners to build upon.
I agree. Now, I'm curious to hear about your personal experiences with Rallyo. Have you ever trained a Cane Corso for this sport? What were some of your biggest takeaways?
I have, actually, and it was quite the adventure.
Really? Tell us more.
So I was working with this cane corso named Rocco, and he was a real character.
I bet. Sounds like a typical Corso.
He was a big guy full of energy and a bit stubborn at times, but he was also incredibly smart and eager to please once he understood what you wanted from him.
So how did you approach training Rocco for Rallyo?
Well, I started with the basics, just like we talked about in the first part. Solid obedience foundation, body awareness, exercises, focus, and attention training.
And how did Rocco respond to all that?
At first, he was a little confused, like he didn't quite understand what I was asking him to do. But once he started to get it, once he started to see those rewards and feel that sense of accomplishment, he was all in.
So it was all about finding the right motivation for him.
Exactly. Rocco was a big fan of treats, so
Yeah.
I used those liberally during our training sessions. And I also made sure to keep things fun and engaging. We played a lot of games, incorporated a lot of movement, and kept the training sessions short and sweet.
So basically you turned training into a game for him.
Pretty much. And that's the key with any dog, but especially with Cane Corsos. They need to be mentally stimulated, they need to be challenged, and they need to have fun. If they're not enjoying the process, they're not going to learn.
That's such a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the technical aspects of training and forget that it's supposed to be a positive experience for both the dog and the handler.
Exactly. And I think that's something that's often overlooked in traditional obedience training. It can be very rigid, very focused on precision and perfection. And while those things are important, there's also room for fun and creativity.
And that's where Rallyo really shines. It allows for that connection, that joy, that shared experience between dog and handler.
Absolutely. And I think that's what made it such a great fit for Rocco. He loved the challenge, he loved working with me, and he loved showing off his skills.
So how did Rocco do in actual competitions?
He did amazingly well. We started with fun matches just to get his feet wet, and he took to it like a natural. He was focused, he was engaged, and he had a blast.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get really excited about trying this with my own Corso.
You should. It's an incredibly rewarding experience. And it's not just about the ribbons or the titles, it's about that bond you build with your dog through teamwork, communication, and shared success.
You've sold me. I'm definitely going to look into Rallyo classes in my area. Now, before we wrap up this episode, I wanted to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the importance of understanding your Cane Corso's individual personality.
Oh, that's crucial. Every Cane Corso is different, and what works for one might not work for another.
So you really need to tailor your training approach to your specific dog.
Absolutely. Some Cane Corsos are highly motivated by food rewards, while others might prefer praise or toys. Some are naturally eager to please and quick learners, while others might be more independent and need a gentler, more patient approach.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Definitely not. You need to be observant, pay attention to your dog's cues, and adjust your training methods accordingly.
Can you give us an example of how you might adjust your training based on a dog's personality?
Sure, so let's say you're working with a Cane Corso who's a bit more sensitive or timid. You might want to avoid harsh corrections or loud noises, and instead focus on positive reinforcement and building their confidence gradually.
And on the flip side, if you have a Corso who's a bit more stubborn or independent,
You might need to be more firm and consistent with your commands and make sure you're not accidentally rewarding unwanted behaviors. But even then, it's all about finding that balance between being assertive and being encouraging.
it's a delicate dance, really.
It is, but it's a dance that's well worth learning. The more you understand your Cane Corso, the more successful you'll be in training them. And not just in Rallyo, but in all aspects of their life.
Okay, so understanding our Cane Corso's personality is crucial. What else can our listeners do to set themselves and their dogs up for success in Rallyo?
Well, besides finding a good instructor or training resources, I think the most important thing is to set realistic expectations.
So, not expecting our Cane Corso to become a Rallyo champion overnight.
Exactly. It takes time, patience, and consistency to train any dog, but especially a Cane Corso.
They're definitely not known for being the easiest breed to train.
They can be a bit challenging, but that's also what makes them so rewarding to work with. When you see that light bulb go off when they finally understand what you're asking of them, it's an incredible feeling.
I can only imagine. So patience is key.
Absolutely. And so is celebrating those small victories along the way.
What do you mean by that?
Don't get so caught up in the end goal that you forget to acknowledge and reward your dog's progress. Every step forward, no matter how small, is a reason to celebrate.
So even if it's just mastering a simple sit-stay or walking nicely on a leash, we should still acknowledge and reward those successes.
Absolutely. Positive reinforcement goes a long way in building confidence and motivation, and it helps keep the training process fun and enjoyable for both you and your dog.
I love that. It's not about perfection. It's about progress and connection.
Exactly. And remember, training should always be a positive experience for both you and your Cane Corso. If you're getting frustrated or your dog seems stressed, take a break and come back to it later.
It's a good reminder that it's supposed to be fun. It's about building a bond with your dog, not about turning them into a robot.
You got it. And I think that's a perfect note to pause on. We've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive. We've explored my personal experiences with training a Cane Corso for Rallyo. We've talked about the importance of understanding your dog's personality, and we've emphasized the need for patience, positive reinforcement, and a whole lot of fun.
Lots of great takeaways. I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear more. We'll be back in a jiffy to wrap up this deep dive with some final thoughts and maybe a little something to ponder. All right, so we're back, and I'm already feeling so inspired after that last segment. Hearing about your experiences with Rocco really brought it all to life for me.
I'm glad to hear that Rocco was a special dog, and he taught me so much about the power of patience, positive reinforcement, and really just embracing the journey of training.
And that's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive Rabbit. It's about exploring these topics in depth, sharing our experiences, and hopefully inspiring our listeners to try new things with their Cane Corsos.
Exactly. It's all about expanding our horizons as Cane Corso owners and finding new ways to connect with our dogs.
And speaking of expanding our horizons, I wanted to touch on something we haven't really talked about yet. The fact that Rallyo is just one of many dog sports out there.
That's a great point. There's a whole world of activities you can explore with your cane corso, from agility to obedience to dock diving to therapy work. The possibilities are endless.
I think sometimes we get so focused on one particular activity that we forget to look beyond that and see what else is out there.
It's easy to get tunnel vision, especially when you find something you and your dog really enjoy, but it's always good to keep an open mind and explore different options.
Exactly. And you never know, your Cane Corso might surprise you with their hidden talents.
Absolutely. I've seen cane corsos excel in all sorts of activities. They're incredibly versatile dogs, and with the right training and guidance, they can achieve amazing things.
So if you're listening and you're thinking, Rallyo sounds great, but I'm not sure if it's the right fit for my Corso, don't be afraid to try other things.
Exactly. There's no harm in exploring different options and seeing what sparks your dog's interest. You might be surprised at what you discover.
And the most important thing is to have fun.
Right? Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's all about spending quality time with your cane corso and strengthening that bond you share.
Well said. Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into rally obedience for Cane Corsos. We've explored the basics of the sport, the benefits and challenges specific to this breed, and we've even shared some personal anecdotes and training tips.
We've also emphasized the importance of understanding your cane corso's individual personality, finding the right training approach, and setting realistic expectations.
And above all, we've stressed the importance of having fun and enjoying the journey
Yeah.
with your furry companion.
Because that's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us, and happy training, everyone.